All right. Well, um, I spent 30 years building software, and that was tremendous fun. It was during the phase when software was eating the world, and it was really, 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 really good. I enjoyed doing it. About halfway through, I started being less interested, however, in the tech and more in the people. And so I was focused on, what makes a high-performing team. And, it was really all the human aspects, not so much the technology aspects. And as a manager, I was focused on helping to promote people, in their skills and in the positions that they held and the responsibilities they had. And I was focused on things like psychological safety and imposter syndrome and relatedness and feelings of autonomy and all that stuff that I think really promotes effective organizations. So much so that sometimes my boss would say to me, Michael, you're a manager and not a therapist. And eventually there came a point where I was going, well, maybe I should fix that. Maybe the thing that really lights me up is not the technologies or the delivering of software, but maybe it's really the people, and I should turn my focus. Well, it's not really either or. At the time I was thinking about the shift, I was going, Michael, you should be a therapist. Why don't you start exploring that? And at the same time, we had this brand new psilocybin thing. And I was looking at that going, well, here is something that is therapy adjacent that I could be doing while I figure out the therapy thing. And so I jumped in. And it's been phenomenal. It's been phenomenal from the perspective of the impact that it has had. People achieving transformations that I know from the conversations that I had during preparation with them, they didn't really believe they could do. There have been a number of occasions where after the journey, I'll have conversations with folks about what their experience is post-journey. And let's say they were struggling with anxiety. They'll describe being in a situation that normally would have triggered the anxiety, going, oh, here it comes, and then realizing, well, now, wait a minute, I guess I don't have to. I guess I don't have to have the anxiety. They could feel that they could, but they don't have to, and so they choose not to, which is a state that they could not have achieved before the psilocybin. That's complicated in some ways. On a very basic, literal level, I did psychedelics as a teenager, as one does, and then really didn't for a very long time. There was a period of time as I was sorting out, well, what do I really want to do when I grow up? Towards the end of my software career, where I was experiencing some depression, and so I tried some microdosing, and that seemed to be helpful. It also taught me, I'm a Buddhist, and so I meditate all the time. And it also taught me that, wow, a little bit of psilocybin, and you start to meditate, and there's a huge synergy there, which is maybe another thing to explore in a moment. And then as part of the process of becoming a facilitator, I had 3 opportunities to have significant journeys. The first one was part of the practicum, The second one was something that I chose to do with the help of another facilitator later. And the third one was an exploration of what a heroic dose was. And the first two were transformative for me in ways that are kind of classic for how this stuff works. I had a long history of some medical PTSD. I'd had some medical trauma in my 20s that lasted for an extended period of time. And out of that, I struggled sometimes with anger. And that impacted many areas of my life. The first journey taught me that was medical PTSD. The fact that it was related to medical stress had never come up in any of the conversations I'd ever had with a therapist. After the first session, it was very clear. I went, "Oh my Lord, of course, it makes so much sense. And Michael, it is time to let that go." And I was able to do that. It was transformative. And I was seeing a therapist at the time, and if you were struggling with a mental health issue, you should think of psilocybin as an assist to therapy rather than therapy itself. I think that it is really helpful to be able to go in to see a therapist post-session and talk about these things. And that's what I was doing. And I really haven't looked back since. The second session, I was at a significant point of transformation. My last child was leaving the nest to go off to college. I was trying to change my career. My wife and I were amicably separated, and we're finalizing the divorce papers. And it was this huge moment of my life was going to be radically different in very powerful ways, tied to who I thought I was. The second journey, there was this moment where I had this vision of holding on to all these threads tightly with my hands, and then laying back, letting out my breath, and just letting them go in a way that felt caring and connected, but allowing these things to just go where they needed to go, which was allowed me to let go of those things, let those people go and live their lives, and allow me to more turn towards living mine. It was really quite helpful, and I think that those moments of transition are also those times when psilocybin can be really helpful. If you have psycho-emotional issues, then it might be psychedelic-assisted therapy. But if you have these moments of transition, you're trying to sort things out, then maybe it's psychedelic-assisted life coaching that you're seeking. So I would say that there's been like three major categories, and within those, there's a number of different issues that people have been dealing with. But because of the background in tech, I do attract a number of people from the technologies. It's to a certain extent we speak the same language. Have had similar experiences, and so you can short circuit some of the conversation by going, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about." The other is older adults who are going through the kinds of transitions that I've gone through. Have been attracted to me. People who are going through divorces, people who are facing empty nests, people who are looking at retirement, that sort of thing. The third one is since I'm a pretty hardcore practicing Buddhist, there are people who are interested in spiritual exploration. And that, I think, is also a really interesting place for people to come in and explore. Michael Pollan talked about spirituality and psychedelics in a way that I think makes it so that it can connect across religions. I'm a Buddhist, but I've worked with Sikhs and Jews and Muslims and the whole range, as well as Buddhists. And one of the things that Michael Pollan has said is that originally he conceived as spirituality as being the opposite of the physical world. That you have the physical and you have the metaphysical. And that his experience with psychedelics taught him that spirituality is really the opposite of ego. That one of the things you get from psychedelics is, first of all, it quiets the ruminating mind, which is ruminating about self, primarily self in relationship to the stuff around you. You quiet that ruminating mind, and then the wall of the ego dissolves a little bit, and you start feeling more connected to the world around you. And that with the neuroplasticity, the ability to change your thoughts and feelings that you get from the psilocybin, I believe that you can carry that forward. And that certainly was the experience of Michael Pollan, was that he was able to carry that forward into his life, this greater feeling of connectedness. And the reduction of self, I think, is really critical if you want to engage in the world in a really productive and happy way. There's a Buddhist writer by the name of Robert Aiken who has said that in order to dance, you have to get yourself out of the way. And I want to dance, and I think everybody should want to dance. First of all, there are no guarantees for any particular individual. And so all you can really look at are, what are the percentages, coming out of research? I mean, if you're looking for solid numbers, that's where you go. And it's difficult to parse that for all the different categories. There are different studies that are showing different percentages. But I would say that in my own experience, about a third have major transformations, and about a half to 60% have significant change. It's clear to them that it's had an effect and it's been positive. Others need more work to go with it. That the first two categories are noticing change all by itself, and then others need a lot more work. And so my general advice is again, think of this as an assist to other work you are doing to transform. That this is not your only tool. So I think it really depends on what it is you're trying to solve. If you're dealing with a mental health issue, then you should see a therapist and have a relationship with them before coming in to do the psilocybin. And then continue doing that after the psilocybin journey. And given that you should expect that you'll have about a 2-week period of enhanced neuroplasticity where the prospect of transformation is greatest. It's longer for some, it's shorter for others, but expect 2 weeks. And in that 2 weeks, try to see your therapist 3 times. To get multiple opportunities to talk about what you're going through, consolidate that, talk about it again, consolidate that, talk about it again, consolidate that. I think it's also really important, and one of the things that I like to do as a facilitator is have a conversation the next morning with the facilitator, just to start identifying what shifts there might be already. Those are toeholds that you can grab onto and expand on. And so having a conversation the next day about what those might be, I think is also really helpful. In terms of the preparation, again, I think it depends on what you're doing. For psycho-emotional stuff, working with a therapist. If it's transition stuff, working with a life coach might be helpful. There are practices. You mentioned meditation. Meditation is great. In fact, it does many of the things that psilocybin also does. It helps to reduce that ruminating mind and help you to be more present. It also enhances neuroplasticity. And so there's a synergy on multiple levels between the meditation and the psilocybin. And so if you work on your meditation coming in and continue it afterwards, then that also is really helpful. I think that journaling, especially prior to the session, prior and after, is really helpful. Prior, I think that if you do it in a way where you're trying to get your editor out of the way and it is just a brain dump, then you're raising things to the surface that then becomes material during the session itself. And that's helpful. Then you raise that stuff into your consciousness, then you start making connections with that stuff that you might not have made otherwise. And then the journaling afterwards, again, helps to gather and consolidate the transformations that start happening.
It's interesting.
I think that that's just really individual. On a theoretical basis, it makes a lot of sense to me that we have developed a set of thought patterns that are not helpful. And because in neuroscience, they talk about, what fires together, wires together. And so the more we have those thoughts, the more we have those thoughts. And so we get these loops and we're stuck in them. And the psilocybin can help break those cycles. And life goes on and we develop new loops. And, at some point there's, liable to be, a time when we need to do it again. There's also natural life transitions that we struggle with that we need insight around, that we're having trouble getting to, that it can be helpful for. And so we gather cruft and need to clear it out sometimes. And we also come to these points where we need help making changes that have to be made. And ultimately, and this is one of the areas that I really care about and focus on, another group that is among those that I work with are people who are nearing the end of life, the final life transition. In some ways, it's the same with all my clients, and that is I am trying to be deeply curious about them and the place that they are at, and let that guide me rather than me guide them. That I think that is really, really, really critical in this work. People sometimes, come and say, well, I'm looking for a facilitator who will guide me through this or that. And then, really what I'm doing is I'm trying to get them to tell me, what's going on and where do they want to get to. If I were to to state a thing that I wish for internally and hope for people who are dealing with end of life is as much as possible try to be right here and right now. And it is incredibly difficult as you're facing the end of your life to do that. But I think that the right here and the right now is really all we have. It also happens to be pretty awe-inspiring and wonderful. The very fact of life, the very fact that you and I can look around the room and see the same thing and have words for it, and I can say, oh, look, there's a camera. And you can look over there and say, yeah, that's a camera. All that goes into that moment of perception, cognition, and communication is just flat out freakishly amazing. And we should, to the best of our ability, try to stay in a state of appreciation for it, and especially when time is short. Don't let it go by. Don't let a moment go by where you aren't appreciating the now. And sometimes when I have a client who sees that, but just needs a little encouragement for why they should do it, I suggest that maybe as a final act, it's a lesson for those they love. And I think that sometimes we will do something for others that we won't do for ourselves. So again, I'm a Buddhist. Within Buddhism, there are many, 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 many perspectives. Just like any religion, it had more years to work on it. Buddha was around about 500 years before Christ. So they've been working on it for a long time. But for me, I tend to think that the end of life is the end of life. However, I think that our experience goes on longer than the moment that we would normally be pronounced as dead. I think that there's activity that's going on that, in some ways, I'm kind of looking forward to experiencing. It is my hope for myself that I'm not so wiped out by pain meds or other things that I can be there for the moment. I get a lot of questions about what people sometimes refer to as bad trips. And I think it's really important for people to understand that that's practically non-existent within the context of a facilitated session in the context of a service center. There are challenging moments. That is not uncommon. Normally, they even if I did nothing, they would not last more than 10 minutes. These things tend to come in a wave, and then you're on to something else. But it's possible to work with people to, have them tell me what they're experiencing. Sometimes saying it out loud really helps to let go of it. Sometimes just changing perspective, getting up, moving around. Sometimes putting on music or changing the music shifts things. And so a lot of times people get really worried about having a bad trip, and that's practically non-existent. I think it can happen out in the world. If you aren't properly supported, it could be a bad time, to be sure.
And an unproductive time.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing that I really want to get out there is misinformation that came from the war on drugs about psychedelics. There are people who are worried that they're going to lose their mind. And that is also pretty much non-existent. The place where it can happen is people who are prone to psychotic events already. Sometimes people don't know yet if they are, and that's typically young people. Typically, psychosis comes on, in late teens, early 20s. But if you don't have a history of that sort of thing, then and you're not young with a family history of it, then it's primarily not a concern. So this is the point at which I should recommend that people speak to their doctors and their therapists, because I'm neither of those things. But bipolar is not being psychotic. Major depressive disorder is not being psychotic. PTSD, response to trauma, is not being psychotic. And so it's really in the area of psychosis. And with bipolar, there's all different types. And when people talk about being concerned about that with psychedelics, it's primarily on the manic side that they're concerned about it. And so, again, you need to talk to, if you have those kinds of issues, you need to talk to a therapist. You need to talk to your doctor. And that, of course, is itself challenging, because there are a lot of folks who are therapists and doctors who are not trained in this area. There are people who are trained in that. From an ethics perspective, if the therapist or doctor doesn't have training in it, then they should not offer. And very frequently what they will do is they'll be very conservative in order to try to avoid an ethics violation. The state of Texas recently allocated $50 million to the research of ibogaine. Texas. It's not like Texas is going to adopt the Oregon model where you could go into a service center for any reason you want to. But Rick Perry, the former governor of Texas, had an experience with the friend of one of his sons where ibogaine made a huge difference. A veteran who had their life transformed. Going to Mexico. The only thing I want to say about the healthcare providers is that there are people who are trained in this. There are people who are knowledgeable, who can actually give you good information about it. If you are concerned about that, your facilitator should be able to point you in the right direction. And there are, in fact, a large number of people who are licensed therapists of a variety of licenses who are also facilitators. Absolutely my pleasure, Mike. Thank you so much.